Okay, I know what you're thinking. The fall of Ringi-san? What is he talking about? But just hear me out on this one. Limbus Company is a gacha game with a gameplay loop that promotes team building. The teams in this game are comprised of identities, and not all identities are created equal, as some are simply better than others. At all points of the game's history, a small subsection of identities have been crowned as the best. I have a whole video about that. But with the brutality of power creep in Limbus, many IDs that were once considered meta-defining have since fallen off. The trends in the meta are closely followed by many prominent community members and resource sites, with all of them making their own tier lists, which aim to reflect the current state of the best and worst identities in the game. One ID that often gets placed among the best is Ring Pointless Student Yi-sang, a standard fair bleed identity released in Season 4. The thing that sets him apart from the other top tiers is the fact that he isn't special. The other units among the best are season highlight or bad end identities, as well as current season frontrunners. Ringi-san is not only neither of those things, but he's also not even seasonal, meaning he's always available to be bought for shards by all players. But what made him so strong, and how has his kit aged in the year that he has been out for? And finally, why do I think he no longer deserves a spot among the greatest? In today's video, I'll answer all of these questions, so stick around and hear me out before going over to your favorite little subreddit or Discord server to say how dumb I am. Because this time I'm right, and also I might be baiting you a little bit. You'll figure it out eventually. But before we start, allow me to shout out community member Soundwave, who helped me greatly with the creation of this video 4 whole months ago. Also, most of my viewers are not subscribed, so feel free to scroll down and fix that if you end up liking what you see. Without further ado, let's get into the story of the artist. It all began on May 16, 2024. Just 2 weeks after Don Sinclair was released, Ringi-san dropped, alongside Ring Otis. The reason why I'm bringing up Don Sinclair here is the fact that he got buffed twice after his release. Such a soft landing, especially for a Walpurgisnacht identity, caused a lot of backlash from the side of the community. And this part is entirely speculation, but it feels to me like Kim Ji-hoon, after the Don Claire fiasco, wanted to release an identity which maybe got just a bit more power than it deserved. And just like that, Ringi-san was born, a true powerhouse, with the ability to inflict 5 different status effects, while also dealing copious amounts of damage. In fact, the unit was deemed too strong by Project Moon, and was supposed to be nerfed. However, in light of even more backlash, the nerfs to his kit were reverted, and the only change was giving him the Sanguine Pointillist passive, which made him less of a menace in mirror dungeons. So, what made Yi-sang's kit too strong at the time of his release? The first thing is that it was simply super easy to reach the ceiling of his conditionals, especially in the mirror dungeons. Unlike most IDs in the game, which get stronger when you inflict more stacks of a certain effect on the enemy, Ringi-san also wants a variety of effects. This sounds like it makes the conditionals of Ringi-san harder to hit, but in reality, a lot of units in the game just have secondary effects that they inflict, making it much easier to max out the artist's power. If we look at his second skill, for example, it only needs 3 effects to be inflicted for it to get guaranteed results. An identity like the One Who Grips or N-Corp, Faust, could straight up set all 3 debuffs up by herself with the use of her skill 2. Such easy access to his damage buffs allowed Ringyisang to perform at his best even when played with win rate only and without a single thought in the player's head. This kind of brings us to the second thing that made Ringyisang very powerful: N-Corp Faust's presence in the bleed meta. Even though Ringyisang gets buffs from a variety of debuffs on the enemy and is capable of inflicting 5 different effects himself, he's still a bleed identity, as he inflicts way more of this effect and also relies on it for bonus power. And what bleed unit synergized better with him than N-Corp Faust? Her kit features 2 unique debuffs, which, as I've said before, can combine with bleed to literally guarantee reuses for Yisang's second skill. But the quantity of her effects was not the only thing that's great about her, as their quality was also top tier for the role. Nails allowed the bleed stack to persist on the enemy, dealing more true damage and keeping up the conditionals of allies, including Ringyisang, for a longer time. And Gaze was the effect that really helped out, as it simply acted as 2 stacks of pierce and blunt fragility. And, you guessed it, Ringyisang, being a mono-pierce identity, benefited from that a lot. This was especially notable for his skill 2, which rolled crazy numbers for the time, but did not have any damage modifiers. On top of adding the 2 effects into the team by using her base skills, Faust also got access to Hexnail, which is an ego skill that inflicts 3 pierce fragility, allowing Ringyisang to deal even more damage per rotation. Overall, her presence in the team added a lot of power to the painter, making him feel much more powerful alongside her than he would be on his own. And this is even without me mentioning the SP healing abilities that Faust has. And just like that, let's transition into the third powerful part of Ringyisang's kit, his passive. Much like the rest of his kit, the painter's passive is multifaceted, being able to increase Yisang's sanity in the early stages of a fight, and then improve his offensive capabilities once he hits 45 SP. At the time of his release, there was no Wild Hunt, Managedon or even Multi-Crack Faust. So the 6 to 8 offense level provided by his passive felt significant. By the way, against an enemy with defense level equal to Yisang's offense level, getting a 6 to 8 offense level advantage results in around a 19 and 24% damage increase respectively. This value is usually not actually what you get out of it, but it's somewhere around that level. This is it for now, but we will get back to this passive a bit later. And finally, his incredible skill 2. Ringyisang's second skill is among the best in the game in terms of raw numbers. If you get both reuses, Sanguine Pointillism deals insane damage, while also inflicting a good amount of bleed count. I don't think I need to explain how good the skill is, as anyone who has ever seen Ringyisang in action knows how great it is, especially for single target encounters. All of these strengths earned Yisang a rightful spot in the highest tier of any tier list at the time of his release. Some even said that he was the strongest identity in the entire game at that point, which is certainly a ballsy claim, but also one I could understand. However, power creep in Limbus company does not show mercy to anyone, and as time passed, more and more identities with higher damage potential, better status infliction and more tools overall started to show up, slowly but surely pushing Yisang to the side in the highest tier of identities. And just like that, the fall of Ringyisang began. And before we get into how the artist lost his place at the top, allow me to clarify what I mean by fall of Ring-Yi-Sang. Because despite the fact that I made it sound so dramatic, it really isn't something drastic. Yeah, that's it. He's still strong, but simply nowhere near the actual top tiers. Now, let me tell you why. First of all, you know how I glazed Encorp Faust for being Ring's best support? Yeah, she's forever benched now, as it's not worth running her on field in the current Bleed team. This drastically cuts his damage output, as he loses access to both Gaze and Pierce fragility. Yi-Sang's new Bleed allies do provide him with some different bonuses, but they're not as good as what Faust could give him. Additionally, the loss of access to the easily inflictable and sticky nails often means Yi-Sang won't have as easy of a time getting both reuses on the first couple of uses of his skill 2 in an encounter, which makes him less consistent in short fights. The loss of Faust also leads us to looking at his passive once more. The SP healing part is still completely fine and very useful, however the 6 to 8 offense level is simply not good enough for today's standards. If we compare it to someone like Wild Hunt Heathcliff, who was released not too long after Ring-Yi-Sang, the difference is like night and day. You might say that's an unfair comparison, but even Barber Otis, who is Yi-Sang's competition as a bleed damage dealer, gets much more out of her passive. And without getting too deep into Limbus damage calculations, there's also another issue. Damage provided by offense level difference is considered a static modifier, which means it stacks additively with enemy resistances, and leads to Yi-Sang dealing less damage against staggered targets than other identities with dynamic multipliers of similar quality. In short, the damage buff from his passive is negligible compared to what his competition is getting. But surely the passive is not all he has. I mean, who even cares about the passive if his skills are good? Well, you have a problem there as well. His skill 2 is still good at dealing single target damage, sure, but first of all, many other grades of damage dealing have access to AoE, making them much more effective against multiple enemies or a boss with multiple parts. And second, Yi-Sang's other skills got severely power-crept. His first skill deals okay damage, but rolls far below the current standard, often failing to win clashes against enemy skills, putting Yi-Sang and his team in danger. And his third skill just pales in comparison to what we have been getting for the last 8 months. Sure, it has 4 coins, but it doesn't roll that high, and only gets damage bonuses on its final coin. IDs like Wild Hunt, Barber, Manager, Full Stop Heathcliff, the Kurokumos, Fire Fist, the Heishos, and many others just deal more damage with their third skills, while not falling far behind with their second, and often doing more with their first. This further proves that Ring-Yi-Sang is just not special in his damage output, and compared to giants like Mao Faust, Thumb Merceau, or any of the AoE damage dealers, he's straight up inferior. But of course, as we all know, Ring-Yi-Sang doesn't just have damage. The whole thing that made him so great in the eyes of many players, in the first place, is his ability to combine damage dealing with status infliction. And, well, as you could imagine, I'm here to tell you, that part isn't that great anymore either. Yi-Sang's bleed count infliction on his skill 2 used to be the saving grace for bleed stacks, but now a ton of identities just inflict a good amount of count on their own, so he's no longer mandatory for that. If you want to play around his extra bleed application, it's extremely inconsistent, as you have to roll the dice and hope you hit the 20% chance. Effectively, Ring's bleed stacking proficiency has become average with the release of more bleed identities, and now he doesn't make or break the bleed stack. If the boss has too many coins, Yisang won't give you a way to magically outspeed bleed consumption with bleed infliction, and if the boss has a reasonable amount of coins, bleed gets stacked with or without Yisang. But surely, his ability to inflict 5 different status effects opens up the possibility to use him in a bunch of teams and find a lot of value, right? At the end of the day, Yisang's versatility is one of his biggest selling points. Well, not quite. It's true that he can specifically inflict a decent amount of count if you get very lucky, but when is that even useful? In Burn, count is the least of your worries. You want potency and dark flame, and even more than that, you just want a bunch of physical damage, which Ring struggles to provide, without getting his power conditionals. And also, the Sinner just has a better identity for Burn. In Tremor, once again, just randomly inflicting count is not good enough. The status effect requires Tremor bursts to be present in an Identities kit to activate the effect, which Yisang simply does not have. In Sinking, yeah, there's just too much competition, not even worth talking about it. And in Rapture, Ring was an actual consideration for a little bit, but he ended up just being worse than Warp Yisang, especially as the Rapture archetype moved from trying to maximize count to trying to maximize potency, making Yisang's count-only infliction simply not needed. With this, I think I'm done slandering my boy. All in all, Ring Yisang is an identity that is now past its prime, despite being considered the single best unit in the game by a lot of players just a year ago. Admittedly, he's still good. Good enough to keep a spot for himself in the 7th Sinner Bleed team, and also still easily good enough to be put into the 6th Sinner Bleed team. But not putting him there is an actual option. However, the days of Ring Yisang being a versatile all-rounder, filling up holes in unfinished teams and ending encounters as the top damage dealer no matter who his teammates were, are long past us. So why did they make this video? Well, I haven't made anything controversial in a while, so that's one thing. But also I do have this identity as my profile picture, so I must have a video dedicated solely to him, right? Also, I do want to highlight that Soundwave, the person that helped me with this upload, has recently become a Prydwen staff member, and actually managed to get Ring Yisang put a tier lower on that site's tier list, among other things. All I'll say is GLL could never. And yeah, this is about it. I hope after I release this video I'll stop getting comments about Ring Sang being OP, because he just simply isn't. In the current state of Limbus, this Yisang identity is just a strong unit in a world of truly crazy creatures. If you disagree or have something to add, leave a comment below, and I promise to read each and every one of them. If you enjoyed the video at any point, leave a like to let me know, and consider subscribing to see more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!